speaking of primaries, we saw really big polls out of Iowa this week. Bernie Sanders is in a virtual tie with Hillary in a state where she's pretty much led for the better part of the last year. And he expanded his lead in New Hampshire to the double digits now, where, by the way, Hillary had a huge upset loss to Obama in 2008. Is this 2008 all over again, Josh? Is Hillary, the inevitable candidate, going to lose once again to a more progressive voice?
I mean, in a way, I couldn't be happier if it happened, just because how do you make the same mistake twice like that? And it's both things. Well, yeah, it boils down to the same thing. Hillary saw who her opponent was going to be, and she was like, him? Nah, we're fine. And I don't think has there ever been a candidate who's blown such a overwhelming lead 2 years before anyone announced. She was up in the 70s, people saying yeah, I want Hillary to be president. And then, I mean, of course that was going to come down, but to be in a statistical tie with Bernie Sanders it's either a sign that she is the Democrats' Mitt Romney, in that she's just this political machine that doesn't really feel what the electorate wants from a candidate. I'm just I'm here to be I'm the perfect candidate. Here I am, accept me. And then is baffled when they're like, why don't you say things we like? Ultimately I think that Bernie Sanders, or at least someone who appeals to that part of the Democratic base, is here to stay. So even if Hillary is the nominee, your VP is probably. I would be stunned if this happened, because I think they play it safer. But what if she picks someone like Elizabeth Warren to be her VP nominee, and it's these two women? I think that would turn out.
Sanders will pick Warren
because.
Buddy. Yeah.
But why? No, he wouldn't. No one would let him pick Warren, because you don't pick someone who's the identical sort of political animal to you. Bernie Sanders would have to pick Jim fucking Webb to be his vice presidential candidate, because he lacks a certain gravitas with foreign policy. He definitely is stronger domestically than that. He needs a Joe Biden character at the very least.
Well, I think he's proven that he's not really going to fall in line with the party already. And just to your point about Hillary Clinton being Mitt Romney, she is not. Mitt Romney wins nominations. But
whoa! To the hoop, Igor. Take it to the hoop.
Boom! It blew the headphone out of my ear.
What we're seeing here is something that, again, we've talked about before. How limited, how shallow Hillary's support is. She's likely to be the nominee, and she may be the president, but she's not going to go in with the kind of support that is really necessary for her to be an effective governor, if you will, the way Obama had a shot at it in 2009. Her support is very weak. I mean, she has a lot of people support her because she has ladies plumbing downstairs. And that can easily be neutralized by bringing in a female vice presidential candidate. And that whole group who says, I want to be the one who votes for the first woman president, is partially, if not wholly, neutralized. She carries a huge amount of baggage with her. And it's unclear at what point that will or maybe not hit critical mass. But it's very rare to have it more than a few days go by without something else being raised. If it's not the Clinton Foundation, it's the email thing. To a certain part of the population, Benghazi is old news. But I think with the emails, it just keeps getting pushed into people's faces again. And Hillary's answers are becoming vaguer and less interesting every time. She also has been around forever. We joke that she's been running for president since the 80s, but in fact, she practically has. And I think Americans get a bit fatigued about that, particularly when she doesn't come across as a very warm person, a very personable person. She doesn't interact with people well. You see her work in the rope lines, and my God, her face looks like they've close-pinned a smile onto her. to get her to go out and do that. And to a certain extent, that comes across. So if there was another viable Democratic candidate, people, I think, would do that. And I think that's what we're seeing with Bernie.
Well, it's funny. It's not just women, because I think one of the reasons a lot of Democrats were supporting her is it seemed it was pretty much inevitable that she was going to be the nominee. So, they kind of blindly fell in line. And now it's changing because Bernie's legitimately it's not just Iowa and New Hampshire. He's been campaigning hard, by the way. She was up by in the 60s on him halfway through last year. And now it's cut down to, the low double digits. Also, it's ironic that Bernie, a 70-year-old man who also has been around forever, by the way, maybe not so publicly, is winning over voters under 45 by a 2-to-1 margin right now. And that speaks a lot to Josh's turnout point, because Obama voters, most of whom were under 45, turned out and Hillary's did not. But Eric, do you think that if he can win New Hampshire and Iowa, this could translate to, Bernie getting on a real roll?
Absolutely. His whole campaign is about momentum, the grassroots movement, appealing to the poor people in society, the people that need something. And he's been really pushing hard for that, and it's working. I mean, he's campaigning on the idea of free education. So he's already got the young students that are looking to get a tax break on that, or to not have to pay expensive tuition. He's campaigning that he wants to make healthcare more accessible in some form. Okay, that's great for people that are kind of having a gripe right now with Obamacare, which, love or hate it, isn't a perfect plan and definitely needs work. He's also, campaigning to fix income inequality. However you do that, I don't know. But we haven't really seen Bernie Sanders' official tax plan by any means. But, when you see Sanders or you hear him say something like this, you tend to believe him a lot more than when you hear it coming from Clinton. Because Sanders is actually genuine in what he's saying. He may not be able to accomplish half the shit he's saying, but he does truly believe in what he's saying. He's not just saying it to win votes over. And that's why I think he's a much more genuine candidate that Americans can get behind. I think a lot of it right now is just fear of picking the loser. And so most people aren't fully on board yet. But once he starts to creep closer to Clinton, and he already is, I think you'll see people make that jump, because he's just a more attractive candidate.
Let's not forget how 2008 went either. Because remember, it was all about feeling. Because on a substance level, Obama and Hillary were identical, in terms of policy. In fact, the only areas I can remember where President Obama sort of differed from her was her approach to Iraq, which I don't remember, and the fact that he did not support the mandate for the health care law, which we all saw get promptly flushed down the toilet when he was in office.
Right.
So the thing is if Bernie takes it to Hillary on substance, then he may or may not come out ahead. But he does. But Americans are really shallow, and Hillary almost knocked Obama out 3 times. Remember with the Muslim picture, with him in the outfit? Whew, that almost killed him. But he came out and made a dope speech, and everyone was like, we got you, man. Salam alaikum. I don't know if Bernie would even engage like Obama did, and he would try to be like, I trust the American voter to be, more mature than that, and then loses because they're not. That's all I'm saying.
Let's pick up on that word engage that Josh used, because I think this is one of the things that's going to change, that would change very, very significantly if Bernie wins in New Hampshire and or in Iowa. And that is, Hillary will have to start seriously engaging him. She has basically ignored him.
What does he have on Sanders, though? What dirt does he have, really? Just
socialist.
Yeah, he's a socialist and whatever. But, I mean, the idea would be that Hillary up till now has ignored him. She has acted
how you think people remember stuff, Eric.
She's acted as if she's running unopposed, basically. When you listen, even her debates, I mean, she doesn't even look at Sanders or with the other guy, Martin O'Malley, who will be selling you life insurance in about 3 months. But she doesn't even look at them. She doesn't mention them. She doesn't, when she campaigns, talk about my opponent or this or that. I mean, if Bernie kicks her butt in New Hampshire, she has to get involved in this. And when you put her frozen face and lame, talking points against somebody like Bernie, who is so real, she's going to look even more shallow and fake. And I think it's going to hurt her even more.
On Clinton. There's so much dirt that Sanders can tap into, too. And he started using some of it, but there is a lot more he could use against her.
But all the
But
Hillary's already been used. It's none of it's new.
That's sort of how.
Sort of. I mean, yeah, the main arguments have already been exhausted, like Benghazi, all that stuff, for her ties to Wall Street. But there's always the things like the dishonesty you can easily expose. I sent you a thing, Igor, where I think, Clinton, she sent out the attack dogs now, her daughter and her husband, to go and fight for her.
Oh, yeah.
After the State of the Union, her daughter.
Bill Clinton. Oh,
Chelsea
God.
was attacking him yesterday that Sanders wants to tear apart Obamacare.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she attacks him on Obamacare, saying Sanders wants to get rid of healthcare plans, blah, blah, blah. Well, I showed Igor this hilarious photo from 1993 where Hillary Clinton is thanking Bernie Sanders for fighting for healthcare. So, I mean, I don't know. It's like you can attack Sanders, but, I mean, his track record is pretty genuine across the board. He's never shied away from the socialist label. I mean, he's not a full-blown communist by any means, but he's definitely passionate about universal healthcare, free education, things that are a lot more progressive in nature. But when you look at the rest of the world, for the most part, the first world, of course, most countries are heading in that direction. It's the United States that's really lagging. I mean, you look in Europe, I know Germany, they offer, I believe, free tuition for I don't know if it's state or province there, but the schools. In Canada, it's heavily subsidized. What would cost an American $30,000 or $40,000 a year is about $7,000 here for a main university. We have the free healthcare. England has free healthcare. Why is the United States lacking on this? Why is the United States still struggling to get paternity leave worked out?
Because a huge part of the American identity, or at least what we like to think of as the American identity and the American story, is that we get this stuff and it was hard. Like, yeah, you can go to Canada and get health care, but we had to fucking work at and it's stupid. I'm not saying that it isn't silly, but
it's an uphill both ways story. And it's like, yeah, that was cool, and the frontier was being pushed in the 1800s, and we were expanding America, but now we're in the modern era, and we need to really think about how we want to go forward. Do we really want to be remembered?
I'm just saying, though, in political context, that story resonates better than giving away giving the moochers all the free stuff.
What Josh is saying, I think, is more generational, and I think that's why voters under 35 and even under 45 have really taken to
Oh,
Sanders.
That's cold, Igor.
But Peter, do you think that he can have the same kind of appeal to a general electorate as he has to younger liberals, or do you think?
Wait, are you calling on me in an ageist?
No, I wasn't.
Is this ageism?
What does the Franklin Roosevelt vote think about that?
Back in the day, we tied onions to our belt. We called them victory cabbages. I had my first flush toilet when, speaking as an older gentleman, the secret to American capitalism has been convincing poor people that it's against their best interest to stop being poor. And while we give tax subsidies to the rich and all this other stuff, it would be wrong to offer anything to the poor people. They've got to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. I mean, if you wanted to sum up the 99% question in a sentence, that kind of does it. I think under 35 people are hopefully a little more aware of this system, that the long con, if you will, and a little more, I hope, maybe globally, if you will, aware that there are other ways to do this than the way we do it in the United States. How many undergrads need to go into the world with, $100,000 or more in debt before they start to think? Yeah, and that work at Starbucks and try to figure out how to survive when there have to be other ways to do this. The same with healthcare, and I'm hoping that those folks will go out and vote the way they think, and not stay home or not give up and say, I get all these Democratic newsletter type things. And, I think one of my kids sent in $5 to the Clinton campaign and put my address on it or something, and I'm every day. But, they're saying basically the theme oftentimes is you don't have to like Hillary, but if you don't vote for her, it's President Trump. So, hold your nose.
That's why they want him. That's why they want him so desperately. Not because he'd be easy to beat, although I think he would be because, again, when you're really running for president, that reality show shit I don't think will pass muster with people. I mean, I'm not saying Americans are not the most nuanced and politically aware people in the world, but they can smell bullshit, or at least
to what you're saying.
performance.
I want to add to what you were saying, Peter, real quick, because you were talking more or less about the American dream, right? And I think with the young people, at least this awakening has happened, and it's starting to happen throughout all the generations. But the American dream doesn't work. The big companies aren't, like as Reagan put it, trickling down. They have a big bucket that trickles into their own bucket, and then they just keep kind of refilling the bucket up top. It's not trickling down to everybody, and I think people have become aware of that, and it's time to try to change the system in a way that will allow everybody to share the wealth. And I'm not saying some communist paradise where garbage men and doctor make the same wage, but at least provide services like healthcare or education to people who cannot obtain them normally. And the way we're going to do that is through a president that has the balls to stand for something like that, because he doesn't care if his name gets thrown through the ringer in the process. And that's where I think Sanders can really excel, because he doesn't care if somebody calls him a socialist. He's used to it.
To what Peter and Josh are saying, I mean, first of all, there's a couple polls that actually show Sanders with heavier leads on the Republican candidates than Hillary. But also, we were talking about turnout before, and I think if any one of these candidates is going to struggle the most with turnout, it's going to be Hillary because of her inevitability, whereas Bernie Sanders voters are fervent supporters. Don't you think that can carry over into the general election?
The trick is, of course, the organization. I mean, I agree with what you said, but when you're talking about getting enough people in Podunk to go vote, that requires a national organization with lots of data. My oldest daughter campaigned for Obama in 2009, and this was in a relatively small town in Virginia. And whenever she showed up, she was handed these computerized lists of addresses in a neighborhood. There were houses that she was told don't bother with because they've already been sort of scratched off potential voter lists for what we never knew why. But I mean, the implication was that they were committed Republicans. There were stars next to houses where she was supposed to spend more time. They really had this shit down. It was quite amazing to me, and they were handing this out to a 17-year-old to do. That, in the end of the day, is what you need to win, the presidency. You need that happening in at least the 15 or 20 states that have all the electoral votes. And whether Bernie can do that, because it costs money, whether he can do it or not is an open question.
Yeah, he is raising a lot, and a lot of his support. I mean, I think the average donations like $27, $29. Hillary's donors are mostly tapped out. Bernie Sanders can keep donating and donating.